Thank you for joining us on the Nikki Medoro Show. I appreciate all of you joining us today, and I am so excited about the conversation we are about to have because it is so timely and it is something that we often talk about on this show. And that, of course, is misinformation. I mean, we have talked about it a lot, from politics to COVID and the vaccines. It's hard to know what the truth is from what we want to believe, right? And that echo chamber that we live in between social media and the news, and we have the problems that we see in today's world because of technology and kind of the way we've lost the ability to have conversations. I actually just saw this quote, and it said the biggest communication problem is we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. And just as we try to protect ourselves from all sorts of things that can hurt us, that could damage us, that could damage our relationships in life, is there a way to protect our minds from misinformation? Well, joining me on the show today is Andy Norman. And here is his book. Andy Norman's book is called Mental Immunity: Infectious Ideas, Mind-Parasites, and the Search for a Better Way to Think. And he's researched the workings of what he calls the mind's immune system. It's part of our body. It shouldn't be surprising that it can have its own immune system. Andy Norman champions the emerging science of mental immunity as the antidote to disinformation, propaganda, hate, and division. He's also the founder of CIRCE, a global institute dedicated to combating disinformation. And Andy, thank you so much for joining us on the Nikki Medoro Show.
Oh, my pleasure, Nikki. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Okay, so I guess first off, most people are thinking immune system. I understand immune system when it comes to fighting off illness or something like that. Help us wrap our minds around the mind's immune system.
Yeah, so very few scientists would have said that the mind has an immune system of its own until very recently. I'm excited to say that my book has helped to catalyze some rethinking in the community of cognitive scientists. And some of us are now thinking that the case for the mind having an immune system very similar to our bodies is actually quite strong. So here's the quick way to understand what's going on. You know why our bodies have immune systems, right?
To fight off illness and things like that, things that hurt us.
Right. We evolved alongside infectious microorganisms that can take advantage, that can enter our bodies and exploit us. And if we didn't develop internal defense mechanisms, we never would have made it this far in evolutionary history. Well, it turns out our minds have been evolving alongside infectious information for millions of years. And the ancestors of ours who didn't get good at spotting and removing the harmful information probably didn't pass on their genes. So we actually have inherited cognitive abilities that can make us pretty good at spotting and shedding bad information. But of course, it doesn't work perfectly. And in this day and age, we live in a very new world now where infectious information can spread at lightning speed, and the ability to spot and shed bad information is more important than ever.
Give us some examples of ways throughout history, human history, of course, in which we have used this kind of immune system mentally to push out misinformation, disinformation.
One of my favorite examples, because it's quite clear, is the transition from the Dark Ages to the Enlightenment, what historians call. So extreme religious orthodoxies stultified life through much of Europe through the Middle Ages. And then a period of open inquiry erupted in roughly the 17th century, 18th century, and it led to a dramatic flowering of human well-being. Basically, what happened there was that people learned how to test ideas scientifically, and they carried over that kind of idea testing, not just from the sciences, but also into ordinary everyday politics and ethics, and it resulted in tremendous enhancements in human well-being. So I like to interpret that moment in history as kind of a place where we actually developed a better way to strengthen the mind's immune system against harmful orthodoxies and other dysfunctional ideas. And the scientific method, of course, is well understood as a method for strengthening our idea testing.
Well, and I'm just going to kind of bring an older kind of way of thinking to current times. I would say, there was a time where we thought that the earth was flat, right? Everyone thought the earth was flat. Now there seems to be this uptick in people that like to latch on to this antiquated way of believing, despite science, despite obvious things that we have, very simple techniques we can do to prove that the earth is round. Explain what happened to us, Andy, on why there's, and I don't know if it's a large group of people. I mean, they have their own society, the Flat Earth Society. How does something like that happen in 2023?
Yeah, so a friend of mine, also a philosopher of science, went undercover at a Flat Earth convention and actually went there and tried to figure out how flat earthers actually think. Mm-hmm. It turns out that there are a small number of people who get celebrated for their ability to get up on stage and present flat earth theory as if in an authoritative way. Mm. They get money, they get paid to go to conferences and give keynote talks. So they're in it for the money. And a lot of times they're pulling the wool over the eyes of the more gullible people who show up and buy the nonsense they peddle. It's the cognitive scientists are starting to figure out why conspiracy theories like the flat earth theory work. Part of it is just that it's really seductive to believe that you're in on this giant world transforming secret, right? And that you can see past the veil of illusion and see reality the way nobody else can, or very few other people can. It's a seductive thought, and a lot of times those emotions drive our thinking instead of actual evidence and reasoning.
What is it about that, though, that seduction? Why not just believe in what former President Obama used to say, a baseline of facts? Like, this is what we know to be true. Where does the desire in human nature come to want to be like, oh, but what we've believed for so long and have proven scientifically is no longer true? What is it about human nature that wants that?
That's a beautiful question, Nikki. I would put it this way. Our minds evolved to latch on to useful ideas. If you could fill your head with useful ideas, you had a survival advantage over us contemporaries who couldn't do that. And sometimes useful but false ideas are very seductive. And so our minds are actually naturally inclined to accept beliefs that make us feel good, accept beliefs that are encouraging, that are comforting, that enhance our psychological well-being. Beliefs can do all kinds of things for us beyond point us to the truth or help us truly understand things. And lots of people want to believe things because they're advantageous, not because they're true. Mm-hmm. But you can learn to sort of retune how the old radios, you tune a knob and you can get into a radio station. You can retune your mind's immune system from the useful to the true and become a much better thinker.
Okay, so I'm assuming that's the crux of developing our mind immune system. Walk us through how we can do that when, again, we've talked about seduction. We've talked about the usefulness in believing in disinformation. And I think most of us are thinking of COVID, right? And it's not really real because I don't want it to be real because it's a heavy thing to think about, right? So talk about, what do I do when another COVID happens or another fill in the blank happens politically, societally, whatever, to protect myself, to know that I'm not going down this useful but false information rabbit hole.
Right. And the problem, of course, is when you start settling for useful but false beliefs, your mind starts to fill up with what amount to mind parasites, and then your thinking goes haywire. And you can get away with that for a while, but eventually you become so estranged from your fellows that you get lonely. People start to look at you funny. People start to treat you like you're crazy. So you don't want to go down the path of believing false but short-term useful things, because it's long-term harmful to do that, both for yourself and for others. So here's some things you can do to make sure that doesn't happen to you. Number one is learn to listen to your doubts. So it turns out doubts are the antibodies of the mind's immune system. That little voice in the back of your head that says, hang on a second here, this really doesn't add up. That little voice is your mind's immune system trying to warn you that a certain piece of information is not reliable. Many people find doubt uncomfortable. They shove it aside and they latch onto something that makes them feel certain and makes the uncertainty go away. That's a trap, because if you do that, you're actually ignoring your mind's immune system and making yourself more susceptible to false and deluded ideas. So learn not to indulge in wishful thinking, hold out for beliefs that are evidence-based, and listen to that little voice in your head that says, I'm not so sure this is right.
Let me break. I had two questions that kind of popped up when you were explaining that. The first is when you were talking about how lonely it can be to be down that useful but false rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
We live in 2023 where you can find a community for whatever nonsense you want to believe in.
Yes.
Do you think that undermines our ability to develop our own mind's immune system?
I do, very much so. So one of the things we need to be able to do in a democratic society is we need to get along. We need to have worldviews that are similar enough to our fellow Americans, say, that we can resolve conflicts and make a healthy civil society. If you simply go all in with the flat earth society, your belief system starts drifting away from those around you, and you end up feeling more and more isolated. You pay a very serious psychic cost, even though it feels like you're benefiting in the short run. And the same goes for extremist political ideas, extremist religious ideas, extremist ideas about the COVID vaccine. The best thinkers on the planet are ones who think collectively. It's not that they indulge in groupthink, but science is a model of how to do this. And scientists always take the objections of other scientists seriously and try to deal with them. Mm-hmm. They try to forge a consensus by testing ideas rigorously. And if you don't do that, and you don't also listen to people who disagree with you, your belief system can become an obstacle to your own happiness and well-being. So learn to cultivate what we call mental immunity. It's also a matter of just having dialogues, conversations with people who disagree with you, people who and just really listening and learning from them. You do that, your mind, your worldview gets richer and more subtle, more nuanced, and you find that you're able to get along better with your fellows.
You're a scientist. I'm sure you're surrounded by people that believe in evidence, believe in, okay, if I can't prove it, my emotions, my feelings, what I want to be true doesn't hold as much water as the fact that there is no evidence. But Andy, that there's a gray area there. That, even from court cases, like, well, we weren't able to prove it with the evidence. We believe it was there. Everything kind of points to it's there, but there wasn't the evidence. And I feel like that is the problem that we find ourselves so much in society, right? It's that not everything that is true is always true, right? Or this happened, but there isn't enough evidence, even though it's so obvious to whatever, right? How do you deal with that? Because I feel like that is the virus that is decimating our immune system, is that doubt, is the fact that, okay, yes, we weren't able to prove it. Yes, it may not always be true, but X, Y, and Z needs to happen, or X, Y, and Z did happen.
Yeah. Well, so there's a widespread myth about that science definitively proves stuff, and that the rest of us just kind of muddle around with uncertainty and probabilities. It turns out, though, that the scientists get very good at estimating probabilities. And so part of science is just trying to figure out, okay, I may not be sure about this, but I can attach about an 85% confidence to it. I can be 85% confident that this hypothesis is true. So scientists often think that way. They use shades of what we call shades of gray thinking rather than black and white thinking. And we all need to get better at this. The best thinkers and predictors on the planet do the following when they encounter new information. If the new information doesn't fit well with what they already believe, but they have reason to think it's reliable, they'll nudge the other beliefs in their thinking up or down a little bit, and they'll nudge their confidence level of the conflicting beliefs up or down to bring them back into alignment. So if I encounter a really good argument for why the world is round, like, for example, that there are photographs of Earth from space, right? I should enhance my estimate of the likelihood that the world is round. Now, honestly, there's no serious doubt that the world is in fact round. But on many scientific issues, it remains a gray area. Yeah. You're quite right. And of course, in politics and ethics and religion, those gray areas get even more pronounced and more difficult to deal with. But we all need to learn to live with uncertainty, live with those gray areas, and kind of keep track of them. So if you're only 85% sure, don't say you're
100%.
Certain. Yeah, just say I think this is true, but don't say I know it's true.
Is there are certain people more susceptible to believing in misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, things like that?
Yeah. So one of the things we've learned from empirical research is that if you indulge in wishful thinking in certain areas of your life, like religion, you become more susceptible to conspiracy thinking and propaganda in other areas of your life, like politics. So the mental habit of withholding belief, where you don't have enough evidence to be reasonably certain, that mental habit can pay dividends in ways that people don't often appreciate. I'm a philosopher by training, and the philosophers who are my heroes, going all the way back to ancient Greece, this is 100 generations ago, they basically said the key to living well and to being a good citizen is basically critical thinking. And to cultivate wisdom, you got to listen to not just your doubts, but other people's doubts and try to take account of them. And if you just make a habit of that, you'll gradually get wiser and wiser over time. You'll become a better citizen. You'll become a happier person.
Now, you have something called the Mental Immunity Project, which I guess is supposed to help us, right? Try to build up this immunity system within ourselves, which I love this conversation. It sounds easy. I know in practice, though, especially in certain communities, in certain religions, in certain fill in the blank groups, it can be a difficult thing to do. So what exactly is the Mental Immunity Project?
Yeah, so what my colleagues and I have done is we've taken all of the latest findings about the mind's immune system, how it works, what causes it to break down, what works to strengthen it. And we've boiled it down into 10 simple lessons that anyone can master by going to the website, mentalimmunityproject.org. You can watch 1-2-minute videos, and they're basically little provocations to think. They'll teach you certain distinctions that are important to keep in mind, and nudge you in the direction of the habits of mind that can keep your thinking relatively, we like to say, mind bug free.
Okay. And so where do we find that mental immunity quiz, the 3-minute quiz and things like that?
Yeah. So the mental immunity quiz will give you kind of a quick measure of your current susceptibility. And then if you explore the rest of the site at mentalimmunityproject.org, lots of free resources there. And we think the key to building a harmonious internet-connected world is for everybody to master these basic skills and teach their kids and help their loved ones master them as well.
I have a few more questions for you, but one that keeps popping into my mind is the fact that, obviously the divisions that have happened in this country, both personal and political and what have you. If I was sick, I wouldn't be around other people. If somebody was sick, I wouldn't want them around me. Should we invite people who seem to be susceptible or going down that false but useful rabbit hole into our lives, or does it serve us better to separate ourselves? How do we deal with that on an actual personal level?
Yeah, boy, that's a tricky question. So just as you're more susceptible to disease if you hang out with people who are sick, you're more susceptible to wrong ideas if you hang out with people who have wrong ideas. So it does matter who you hang out with. It does matter who you listen to. It does matter who you talk to. It's also important that we try to have constructive conversations, even with people who disagree with us, in part because it can provide an important reality check, it can help us test our beliefs more fully. But also those people need to know that we're really willing to listen and learn from them. Because when people feel angry and isolated, they develop weirdly warped ways of thinking. And if somebody just comes along and says, tell me more about that. Explain to me why you're so opposed to taking the COVID vaccine. Explain to me why you think the world is flat. If you're a good listener and you give people a chance to sort of explain things, a lot of times they'll hear the incoherence themselves, and that'll plant the seeds of doubt. So it's better to be a good listener than to be a, clever arguer.
Right.
When it comes to reaching those who've fallen down rabbit holes.
And then how do we deal with what you had mentioned earlier, the economic benefit of leading people down those types of rabbit holes? I mean, we live in society where influencer is a job description, and it makes people a lot of money, and it's part of our economy. We can't deny that.
Yes.
Now that could be a political influencer, merchandise, whatever. How do we differentiate, I guess, between someone that's just trying to make a buck versus someone who truly believes and is really championing an idea?
Yeah, so people have been hacking one another's minds with words for thousands of years. And, manipulative speech goes back to the great orators of ancient Greece and Rome. So the problem is not new in that way. And every single one of us is susceptible to mind manipulation from clever enough demagogues or propagandists or advertisers. But you need to learn what manipulative messaging looks like so that you don't fall prey for it. Otherwise, you become a sucker for somebody else's agenda. Certain kinds of messaging try to steal your freedom, your autonomy, your ability to think for yourself. So if I just keep repeating to you, the election was stolen, the election was stolen, the election was stolen, I'm not helping you think. I'm not helping you expand your horizons. I'm not helping you think more in a more nuanced way. I'm trying to hack your mind. But if you honor a person's ability to think for themselves and support it through information that really lets them think for themselves and make up their own mind, without deception, without coercion, anything like that, then you're freeing the person instead of manipulating them. And we at the Mental Immunity Project are all about trying to use this new science of information, misinformation immunity to free minds from mind manipulation.
Do you think that dismissing people is one of the most dangerous things that we can do in regard to this? I know that you say, listen, ask questions. Some people, just turn off that listening switch the minute that they don't feel that there's any evidence or anything to support the claim, or don't want to listen to what they consider nonsense. Is there a danger that of being like, I'm just not going to engage?
Yeah. Well, yeah, as some of my friends say, it's really important to have an open mind, but not so open that our brains fall out.
Exactly.
I mean, there are people who I think spew nothing but nonsense and who I don't think are worth my time listening to. I think everybody feels that way. But when you start to feel like the entire mainstream culture is deluded and you don't want to listen to any of them, you've probably got a problem. And the problem is probably yourself, right? You can become too suspicious for your own good. This is an actually really interesting finding. Doubts are the mind's antibodies, but just as the body's immune system can go berserk and attack the body itself, the mind's immune system can go berserk and attack the mind itself. So if you start having doubts, if you become suspicious of everybody, if you become so cynical that you can't trust anybody, your mind has an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah.
Your doubts are out of control, and you need to learn how to calm those doubts so that you can actually learn to think properly again.
I think I'll say what many people are probably thinking, easier said than done for some people, but it's worth the effort. Andy, mentalimmunityproject.org is the website. If you guys want to check out that quiz and learn more about it, again, here is a picture of his book. I always lose everything right before. Oh, here it is. This is his book, Mental Immunity, Infectious Ideas, Mind-Parasites, and the Search for a Better Way to Think. Check out the website as well, in addition to that book. Andy Norman, I appreciate your time. Fascinating conversation that is extremely timely. And I appreciate your time coming on the Nikki Medoro Show.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And I love your interviewing style. I'm going to have to start listening to your show.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, become a subscriber. We're right here on YouTube every day. So thank you so much.